What's going on, Lacrosse fans? Welcome to the PLL Flash on the Lacrosse Flash Podcast Network. I'm your host, Ryan Hulsebos, joined by Flash Editor-in-Chief Austin Owens as we get set to look back at an action-packed Week 8 and look ahead to the quarterfinals this weekend from Salt Lake City, Utah, as the Cannons were able to grab that final playoff spot over the weekend on Saturday with their win over the Chrome. The Chrome becoming the only team eliminated thus far from playoff contention and one of two teams that won't be playing elimination lacrosse this weekend as the Water Dogs managed to lock up the number one overall seed on Saturday with their win over the Atlas, the number one seed awarding a bye this weekend through to the semifinals. We also saw four other great games between our other four PLL teams in the middle of the table. Those results setting the stage for our three quarterfinal matchups this weekend. All of that and more coming your way. But first, Austin, how are we feeling now 2 days removed from this final regular season weekend with the playoff picture now set ahead of this coming weekend out in Utah?
I'm just kind of happy that there's not a bye week. It seems like we've kind of been a little stop-start. I understand why with the PLL schedule, so I'm not going to get on the league or anything like that. But it's nice to have consecutive weeks of lacrosse again, so I'm excited for that.
Absolutely. That was one thing. Obviously, we went from week 4 to week 5. Then we had, obviously, the All-Star break, which was the All-Star game the following week, a bye week in between the All-Star game and week 7. We get to week 7, another bye week. Obviously, now we're at week 8. Immediately into the quarterfinals, we will have a bye week between the quarterfinals and the semifinals, but very nice that we are just kind of taking a nice groove right here into the playoffs. So definitely a lot to look forward to, but a huge weekend last weekend. It was the biggest weekend so far in the PLO's short 3-year history with 6 games out in Albany, and now we'll head back to Salt Lake City for the quarterfinals, back to the home site of last year's PLL Championship Series, although this time we will be from Rio Tinto Stadium. But those 6 games from this past weekend will now be cut in half, as we'll have just 3 games this weekend in the first week of the PLL postseason, with the first playoff game of 2021 on Friday night, 8:30 p.m. Eastern start between the Archers and the Chaos. And a rematch of this past weekend's game. The second game will be on Saturday between the 2 seed, the Atlas, and the 7 seed, the Cannons. 2:30 Eastern start on NBC, and then the Redwoods and the Whipsnakes will meet for the third time in the past month and a half, the rubber game of 2021. And the winner will play the Water Dogs, who were awarded that bye through the first round. So we should be treated to another exciting weekend. We'll get to those matchups as we go and into more detail later in the week on Goal Line Extended. But let's start with the one team that won't be playing this coming weekend, as the Chrome took their 7th loss of the season in what was an elimination game for them, as they'll now select first overall in the 2022 college draft after falling to the Cannons on Saturday. But Austin, you look at this Chrome team, the depth of the youth that they already have, whether it was having guys like Ryan Terafenko or Jackson Morrill fall into their laps in the 2021 college draft. Justin Anderson has played really well in recent weeks. Kevin Rogers comes in undrafted, and you now have Dylan Malloy as a centerpiece that you can kind of build around going forward offensively. And then on the defensive end, you recently acquired, the young Nick Grill, Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year. JT Gallows-Harris, he didn't play all season after being drafted 3rd overall. He should be healthy going into next year, as well as Attackman Jordan Wolf. So obviously, the result is unfortunate here against the Cannons, but if you're a Chrome fan looking forward to the future, Austin, you look at the injury report all season, the uphill battle this team had to fight since week 1. You look over at the Atlas in Seattle, how fast that turnaround was. You already have the heir apparent in goal as well in Sean Scanoni. We could easily see a rise like we saw from this team last summer out in Utah next year in 2022.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see. I think, the injuries played a big part in this. I mean, before the season even started, you can't really skirt around it. You lose Matt Gaudette to the incident that happened in the offseason. You lose Randy Stotts to what is believed to be an ACL injury. JT Giles-Harris goes down in the national championship semifinal. Like, you're already behind the 8 ball, and then it's, Haas goes down, then Jordan Wolf goes down, then this, that, and the other.
Goes down. Jesse King hasn't even played all season, obviously on the unavailable to travel list.
Yeah, you're losing a lot of pieces in a short amount of time. And, the PLL, the teams are deep, but they're not deep enough to sustain, 5 or 6 guys that could have been an impact to your team being out at one point in time. So they did well just to, 2 wins doesn't look great on paper, but they were in a lot of the games that they played in. Tim Sudan had been playing really well. And I think, it's tough because among all those losses now is Joel White and John Galloway are both gone, and congratulations to them on great careers. But you have like you said, you have your apparent in goal and Sean Scanoni. You've got some guys, and like even the guys that didn't really play much this year, and Eli Salama and James Barclay, they're going to come in and sort of fill that role that Joel White sort of left behind when he wasn't at the championship series last year because of, I believe it was work, or he just, stepped away for the summer. But yeah, it's going to be tough. But I mean, the number 1 overall pick seems really nice. Like you said, you got Malloy, you've got a couple pieces to build around. Giles Harris hasn't played yet. Randy Stotts hasn't played for you yet. Jesse King is going to be a huge piece of attack. Like, they can go into next season and their starting attack unit is probably going to be Dylan Malloy, Randy Stotts, Jesse King, and Chris Gray. And then you also add in Jackson Morrill and possibly Colin Heacock, who can play midfield and attack. So they look fine. It's just, the margin's so thin with all the talent in this league, and they were just the team that drew the short straw in this situation this year.
Yeah, the Chrome definitely, in the inaugural season there in 2019, the Chrome also finished the summer with just 2 wins. The following year, despite it being that COVID-shortened championship series, we saw, the Chrome finish towards the top of the regular season standings up there in second. We could see something similar if they can put together a similar turnaround here going into 2022. Again, they'll be without goalie John Galloway and LSM Joel White, as they both have retired from professional field lacrosse. But the Chrome season has come to a close. We'll see what kind of reworks here. Maybe we can do something, so a different word than rebuild, as we use rebuild there for Coach Rubier and the Atlas. Maybe like a rework here for the Chrome going into this offseason.
Let's go with reload.
Okay,
for this one.
Reload here for
I don't
think
they're that many pieces away, because you got Scanoni and you got Giles Harris, and you've got, like, another thing is Mike Manley could step away. It seems like there's sort of a will he or won't he every year with his job, so it's another piece. But you have Bernhardt, you have JT Giles Harris, you've got the other guys that I mentioned before at Pull. So, like, I don't see them having a weakness anywhere, because you still have Rannigan, you still have Crotty, you still have McIntosh in the midfield, then you have Heacock, who I mentioned already. Like, this team's going to be okay. It's just, it's like 2019 is, because they finished in last next season. A lot of people are going to go in sort of doubting this team, and they're going to prove people wrong again, because they're sneaky good. Not even sneaky good. They're just a good lacrosse team. Nobody's sneaky good in the PLL. Everybody's just really good.
Yeah. Obviously, the Chrome only 2-7 this season, but you look at their 2 wins against the undefeated at the time Whipsnakes, and against the undefeated at the time Archers. So obviously, any team can beat any team every weekend. The Chrome obviously getting the short straw for a few of these games, finishing the season 2-7, the first team to be eliminated here in 2021 at the hands of the Cannons, who punched their ticket, the final ticket to the PLL quarterfinals, over the weekend in a win against the Chrome. As the Cannons, they fell behind early, but a 5-goal second quarter would give them the lead going into the half. Paul Rabel will continue to dominate, as he did all afternoon, and he, along with most of this Cannons team, will now have an opportunity this weekend to win their first PLL playoff game. But Austin, 4 goals from Rabel. 1 was from behind the 2-point line. Lyle Thompson also found the back of the net twice. Nick Morocco was phenomenal. He saved 62% of the shots he faced. And in elimination lacrosse, the big names that you would expect to step up in this moment, they do just that and perform. The Cannons moving on now to the PLL's quarterfinal weekend.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest point to make here, is that, a couple times this season that you've seen goose eggs from Lyle. I think it was only 1 game. You've seen 0 points from Lyle.
We got a few goose eggs in terms of the goal scoring. I think we had 1 goose egg in the points column for Lyle.
Yeah, he had 1 or 2 points in a couple of weeks, but obviously, I think we've talked about this before. It wasn't really Lyle production. Rabel's had a couple games where he's gone with 0 points, but as a midfielder, it's, it happens. Your big name stepped up. Guys like Steven Rafis showed up. He's not obviously a big name on this team, but a big name rookie and a guy that they've really looked to this season. Shane Jackson, another big name, maybe not in field lacrosse, but he sure shows up in box, and he, I guess he's kind of got that clutch gene. He scores timely goals, and he did that again in this game. But yeah, Paul Rabel was the story. Lyle Thompson, the story. They needed to be big, and they were for the Cannons. And Nick Morocco was huge again. I mean, he's really been an under the radar, big time contributor for this team, and he's sort of underrated because of, the heroics of Lyle and how much he gets hyped up for a good reason. And then, Paul Rabel, he's had a hell of a season, and he should get all the praise that he's getting, because a lot of people thought he was done. So congratulations to him for having that big bounce back and proving everyone wrong. But yeah, it's, I don't really know what to say about this team, because they shouldn't have been in a position where they had to be in a win or go home game.
What we've been saying all season.
They're so good. They're too good to be in that situation, but I find myself saying it's a matter of one goal or it's razor thin, like I did when I was explaining the Chrome. It's one goal games that they were in that they lost. It's certain scenarios that could have easily gone the other way, and that's how tight it is in the PLL. And that's, I think, what everyone's learning is, like you said before, anybody can beat anyone. So, it didn't go the Cannons' favor. It did go the Cannons' favor this week, I should say. And, they're moving on to the playoffs, so we'll see how they manage. I don't know what they're going to do in the playoffs, but they'll keep it entertaining, that's for sure, one way or the other.
Absolutely. And then looking ahead to later in this week, obviously you mentioned Paul Rabel's name. I mentioned his name there as well. Obviously, he had a big weekend this weekend, but on Thursday we'll have some award finalists announced here for the end of season awards for the PLL. Obviously, Midfielder of the Year being a big one. Do you see Paul Rabel's name being included in that list of midfielders that are on the finalists? Obviously, players and coaches choosing the finalists for this award. The awards, they'll be announced this Thursday, August 19th.
It's going to be tough. I think the midfield has really stepped up their game this year, and I'll try and keep it short here. I think Zach Courier is a lock to be a nominee for that award. I think he's probably the winner of that award. If
probably
you want
Tom Schreiber in there as a lock as a finalist as well.
Tom Schreiber is always going to be a lock in there, and then you have the Redwoods guys, Jones, Perkovich, and Jules. So it's so tough with guys. Like, I think you could honestly make a case for a guy on every team. I think Colin Heacock could even have a case for the run he had, maybe not down the stretch, but in that middle portion when they won those couple games. And there's a guy on every team that could be a player. Connor Kelly's another guy that was really, really good throughout the season and then missed the end due to injury and didn't score in his last game. So it's going to be tight. It's like the front end is so loaded in this league. It's hard to really tell, but I think if you asked me in the first half of the season, I would have said Rabel is probably a lock. I think he had 20-something points going into the last handful of games, or the last couple of games. I won't say handful, but he had a really good first half and then, had a couple spotty games. And then, other guys like Miles probably had close to 10 points this week. I haven't checked the totals, but he had 7 points or 6 points. This week. Yeah, he was unbelievable. And then, like, those Redwoods guys single-handedly make it so difficult for anybody else to be nominated for that award because they've been so dominant.
The Cannons clinched that 7th and final playoff spot in the league, and that will line up a date with the Atlas this coming weekend in Salt Lake City on NBC. The Atlas coming into the playoffs as the 2 seed after a loss this past Saturday against the Water Dogs, and what is one of, if not the biggest surprises here of the 2021 season, as the Atlas, in what looked like the middle of that retool, that rebuild, close out the season winning 5 of 6 games, 5 in a row before this loss here to the Water Dogs in Austin, despite this loss on Saturday against the Water Dogs, which awards the Water Dogs, as we said before, that number 1 overall seed in the first round bye. We'll get into the Water Dogs here in a moment, but it forces the Atlas into this game this weekend against the Cannons. Despite that, you got to feel good if you're Ben Rubier about where you're at as a team going into this playoff stretch. You're also looking ahead to the return of Jack Concannon. Obviously, he was not dressed or on that restricted roster this weekend, so we could see him return from that groin injury this week. Obviously, again, we've had these conversations on this show on GLE with Jordan Johnson, whether you want to play Colarusso, whether you want to play Concannon. So that's obviously a discussion for another time, but you look at bringing all these pieces back. The Atlas are healthy, obviously coming off what was 5 games in a row. Now, obviously, you have this loss here in between. How confident are you in this Atlas team going forward? Built around this young core led by, obviously, Jeff Teat.
I'm not going to put any slander on Jeff Teat's name, and nor have I to begin with. So any team that has
Grant Amen a couple weeks ago as your MVP.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a little bit. Don't worry. That's just a nice little tease for everyone that wants to stick around to the end. But any team with Jeff Teat on it has a puncher's chance of winning. And then you add in, this Costabile and Jake Carraway and, Cochran's had a big couple weeks here, getting used to getting that, rapport with Teat going again. The thing that's interesting to me, and I think I'll probably wrap the Atlas and Water Dogs in this sense into the same thing of like this game saying, a lot of people have been saying, do you want to win this game and be the 1 seed and then miss another 2 weeks? Or do you want to lose this game and play again next week so you keep that repetition? And it's tough because I think Atlas is in a position, and I'll try and tie this in with the goalie situation, where Colarusso's played so well. He's won you 3 straight games, and then had you right in there with this game. Kincannon hasn't played in a little while, but he's your guy. So with Ben Rubior, I think what you do is you ride the hot hand and you go with Colarusso in this playoff game. But I'm not certain on that because Kincannon's the guy that got you there to start the season. Colarusso's the guy that ended it. So do you throw a cold Kincannon in? Maybe you, if you're up by enough in the second half, you give him a couple, like a quarter, just to get him going. It's really a wait and see thing when I think it comes to them. And I think the Atlas wouldn't have been hurt by being off for 2 weeks. But I think there's been, like I said, so much stop and start with the bye weeks and the All-Star break over the last couple weekends that guys aren't quite as dialed as they were midseason when they were playing 2 weeks in a row. So are the Water Dogs at a bit of a disadvantage? Maybe. I guess we'll find out when they play in Philadelphia, but I think the Atlas are going to be happy that they have Kincannon back, and it's a good problem to have that your backup goalie's playing as well as he is, that you have to choose between playing your proven starter and playing the guy that's won you 3 of your last 4 games. It's a pretty good problem to have. But the team in general, I'm not worried about Atlas at all. And I think Ben Rubior is happy just getting to where they are. They're not satisfied at all, but let's be honest, nobody expected them to be in the position they are given what they went through in the offseason and unloading all those assets. So not playing with house money is so, I don't want to make it sound like a direct slap in the face to that team, but nobody counted you as a team that was going to make a playoff run, let alone be in contention for the first seed. So I think at this point, you're just going in with no pressure and just playing loose and having fun.
Yeah. So obviously you look at this Atlas team, they looking to get back to their winning ways this weekend, hope to advance to that semifinal. But you mentioned it there. Do you want to, ride this momentum here from this week 8 game? Obviously, look at the Archers. You look at teams like the Redwoods. They got wins there on Sunday. The Redwoods weren't able to get that win. Or no, they did on Sunday. I'm getting my games mixed up here. Obviously, we had 6 games this weekend, biggest weekend of
those 2 doubleheaders
in its history. So we're getting a little mixed up here. But the Redwoods and Archers, they're able to ride the momentum from those Sunday wins into this weekend's games. Really didn't have that number 1 seed on their minds come that Sunday game. But in those come Friday, both those teams, really the only 2 teams that could have made a shot at this 1 seed. They lost on Friday, so obviously you didn't have to think about it on Sunday. But this Atlas team, do they want to ride the momentum? Again, a good thing. You got a guy in Jack Concannon who was questionable going into this past weekend. Obviously, they held him out. He wasn't even on the restricted roster as Tate Boyce got the backup spot here for the Atlas. But we'll see. Looking ahead to this matchup, for this Cannons Atlas matchup this weekend, whether Jack Concannon will be back. We'll see who gets the start there. This will be the 3rd time that these 2 teams meet this season, the Cannons and Atlas. The Atlas taking the first 2 meetings, each by a goal, in just as recently as a few weekends ago in Week 7. So we'll look forward to that playoff game. Hopefully, we'll see a game similar to the previous 2, obviously coming down to a single goal. It will be the second of 3 playoff games over the weekend. The only one aired on NBC, while the other 2 will be both on Peacock. But because of that Atlas loss, and in fact, the team that it comes to, the Water Dogs, they move up in these standings and secure the first seed ahead of the quarterfinal weekend. And with that bye, the Water Dogs will watch this week as the other 6 teams in the playoff field battled out to try and move on. They'll play the winner of the Redwoods and the Whipsnakes there in the semifinals. And Austin, we just talked about how hot the Atlas have been before this loss. But now the Water Dogs come into the playoffs having won 4 straight games. Dylan Ward has been playing some of his best lacrosse in cage over that stretch behind one of the league's best defenses. And we should also see the return of Michael Sowers on the other end of this break for the Water Dogs. But you look at this team, they're carrying a ton of momentum, obviously talking about the momentum thing. They're carrying a ton of momentum into this into this playoff run, especially coming off back-to-back wins against the Whipsnakes in Week 7, and now the Atlas here this past Saturday. Do you see the Water Dogs, the number 1 seed in the playoffs, as the team to beat here heading into September?
I will say one thing off the top, and it is don't let Dylan Ward get hot.
Don't let Dylan Ward get hot.
That guy's a
hot. So they let him get hot.
Yeah, it's bad. It's sweatpants and all. He's hot. The man's on fire. 17 saves again in this last game. He was fantastic. I don't know if they're the team to beat. And the reason I say that is because, they've had these 2 doubleheader weekends where they've won 4 games, 4 of their 7, it would be, or 4 of their 6, excuse me. and then 2 straight games to end the season. But it's so tough because the reason I don't think they're the favorites is because you look at the matchup they have in the semifinal. They have to either go up against the Whipsnakes, who are at full health again, with Matt Rambo and Zed Williams and Jay Carlson, who's firing right now.
Talking about with Liam and Jordan
and Justin Gutterding.
If this is the Whipsnakes team that we said at the start of the year, myself, you, Dan Arestia, whether it's Noah, and everybody said we are not picking against this Whipsnakes team. This is the Whipsnakes team. They're back. They're healthy.
And they just added Justin Gutterding, who's literally like not Connor Fields, like sort of he's a guy that should get on the board every once in a while, but he's not going to be your main guy. That's how I sort of equate him to Connor Fields in his scenario with the Archers. But Connor Fields also has like 22 points, so that might not be a fair comparison. They either have to go up against the Whipsnakes at full health, or they have to go up against the Redwoods, who are also ridiculously stacked and make a run at the title every year. And like I love the Water Dogs so much, so I'm not. I want to pick them, and I want them to win, also because I don't want them to get ripped on by their owners. I feel bad for them about that. But it's so hard to pick somebody as the favorite. I wouldn't even pick the Whips as the favorite because they just lost their last game to the Archers.
Yeah.
Like the 2-time defending champions who hadn't lost in 600 and whatever days it was. 672, excuse me. And they've lost a bunch of games down the stretch, partly because of injury, but they were full strength and they lost to the Archers straight up a couple days ago. So like I don't really look at any team and say this team is going to run the table and be good. Anybody can beat everybody, and that's the thing is we keep saying the same thing. I keep saying the same cliche, but there's no other ways you can sort of dress this cake, if you want to put it that way. I have no confidence in any of my picks when I go do pick them on the website. I don't do it for Flash right now, but I don't know if it was the same for you guys picking Flash. But
I felt good about I've done really well on my picks. Week 7 and week 8, my Bosa's bets. I'm 26 and 27 right now in the season. We're a game under 500. It was bad at certain points. Like week 4, week 5, I was going like 2 and 6, 1 and 5.
Yeah.
Week 7, we turned it around. This week, Friday was bad. Turned it around Saturday and Sunday. So usually I'm like at those low stretches, I was like, all right, so I'm not feeling good about these picks. But
you have to be confident.
I feel like I can predict. Yeah. I feel like I'm getting a grip of it.
You have to be confident in your picks. So let me say it this way. I was confident when I went and did pick them on the website. And then I went back this week because I was like, oh, let's see how I did from week to week. And it was like 1 win, 2 win, 1 win, 3 win, like just all over the place. I think I went 0-5 one of the weeks in like the middle of the week. So it was just like disaster. So don't ask for my advice when it comes to picking games. This is the number one takeaway from that. Secondly, it's just, I can't count anybody out, and that includes the Water Dogs. They could make it to the championship. They could go out in the semifinal. The good thing is they've earned themselves a spot in the semifinal, which is something to be said for them. It's a later draft pick, obviously, but Andy Copeland's proved that he's not afraid to make big moves and to make that big splash to get guys. So I have a lot of confidence in them. I have all the confidence in the world in Dylan Ward and net the way he's playing right now. I have all the confidence in Josh Courier doing what he does. Oddly enough, Jake Withers, you read into his stats a little bit, he doesn't win a lot of clamps. I have all the confidence in the world that they'll battle with a team at the X and give their guys those extra possessions. So I'll never count the Water Dogs out, and you might upgrade that depending on what Michael Sauer's status is going into this game in a couple weekends. I'd imagine with 2 weeks off now, he's going to be in the game because he's been on the sideline for the last couple games. So we'll see. I'm excited to see the Water Dogs play is short answer, but I don't know if I can name them the favorite right now because anybody could be the favorite at this point.
Absolutely. I mean, you look at the Atlas, obviously taking the loss to the Water Dogs, but they were coming off 5 straight wins. The Archers are now getting hot. The Chaos are sneaky getting hot here. Obviously taking the loss over the weekend to the Redwoods there on Sunday, but they are sneaky getting hot come the end of the season. On Friday, they were able to get to 500 for the first time since 2019. So definitely, I mean, this is a wide open race, I think, looking at it this weekend. I really think the one I'm looking at these matchups, obviously it's Monday night we're recording this. The one game I'm like, all right, I think the Atlas over the Cannons would be a safe one, but I'm looking at these other 2 matchups. I'm like, right now I couldn't tell you Well, I'll have to think about it during the week. But you mentioned there,
No idea.
Water Dogs making some big additions. They bring in Christian Mazzone from the Archers today here, as today was the PLO's waiver deadline closed today. Teams will not be able to make any more moves in terms of dropping players off the player pool. The only way they would be able to is if there would be an injury. They'd have to get league approval to make that addition. But obviously, we've been watching the restricted rosters. If a player is not on an active game roster or the restricted roster for that weekend's games or game, obviously game or games with teams playing multiple games, if they're not on the roster for 3 weeks, they become non-restricted. So obviously, it's any team could pick a player up. Christian Mazzone becomes available. I'd imagine a couple teams would have wanted to pick up Christian Mazzone, the Water Dogs, the team to do it. Now you might bring it, or I'd imagine you do bring Michael Sowers back here for the semifinal. I think that should be the expectation. You bring in Christian Mazzone. I'd imagine you insert him into the starting lineup immediately, but obviously bringing him in, very big news for this Water Dogs team.
Yeah, we were talking about Mazzone last week, and I don't remember the context, but I think it was just the Archers are so
deep. He hasn't played for the Archers. Probably was what it was.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. Now that I'm thinking about it, it was the Archers are so deep that a guy that scored 9 goals for them in a condensed series doesn't even touch the field. Christian Mazzone deserves to be out there, and I think he's going to play a role of some kind. I don't really know what it is because we have to see what Sowers does, but I'd imagine it's sort of what he did with the Archers. It'll be, off-ball cutter, he finds a soft spot in the defense and finishes inside. That's what he was really good at, is just catch and shooting in tight. And you need guys like that in your lineup, especially with a guy like Sowers who's going to draw an early slide if he plays from X. You need guys that are going to just be there for you, and he's going to be a big piece. It's another thing to be said about the Archers just being able to let that guy go and how good they are in midfield, that it's not even going to bother them come game day. But yeah, the Water Dogs I'm excited to see what they do with him. They might not even dress him. I don't know. I'm assuming you have to drop somebody to pick somebody up, so maybe he had a goal, but maybe that's Matt Witcher. Scarpello's played really well at short stick D mid. Maybe it's Tate. Tate Boyce isn't on that team. I'm out to lunch. But if you have to drop somebody, I'd imagine it's probably
goalie.
Yeah, they do have a third goalie. His name's escaping me at the moment. It might be Tate Boyce. DeLuca and Cipriano. So I don't think they're going away from either of those guys. It's kind of interesting that DeLuca hasn't been picked up. Or Cipriano as a backup.
I haven't paid attention to how Copeland has. Obviously, Ward is the starter, but we've seen, early in the season when Ward was getting pulled, it was like Ward would get pulled, but Cipriano was the other guy.
Yeah.
Oh, the next game Ward gets pulled, but DeLuca is the guy dressed. So it's kind of like I feel like it's been going back and forth. Maybe
I think one of those.
If it was a strategic thing, I was about to say maybe a strategic thing.
I was going to say because
Copeland's doing that as a strategic thing.
Yeah, because you have to sit for 3 games, so I'm assuming he's just flip-flopping because he knows Wardo's going to be the guy in net, and that's a little loophole to make sure you don't lose that goalie. Yeah. So, I don't know. I like it. I like the Mazzone ad. I think it's a good one. We'll have to see how they use him, but I think him with, Courier running a 2-man game with somebody up top will free up some looks for him, and 9 goals last summer with the Archers, he's a good player, so he deserves to be on a roster. He deserves to play somewhere, so I'm glad he got an opportunity.
Christian Mazzone set to get another opportunity here with the Water Dogs, and then we're looking at those top 4 teams. On one hand, we had the Atlas all season, who started at the bottom of our power rankings and of the season standings. They quickly moved their way up. On the other, you have the Water Dogs. They dropped their first game of the season. They went on to sweep 2 games there in Atlanta in week 2. They then lose their next 2 games in week 3 in a very embarrassing fashion against the Archers. But then the team I had as the turnaround team of 2021 with all the additions Coach Copeland makes over the offseason, they finally fall all the way to the bottom of the standings, but then they finally get on this run that they ride into the month of September. We'll see if they can keep the train rolling, as they'll have 2 weekends off here before the semifinals in Philadelphia. So we got our top 2 teams in the league. One of them will play this weekend, while the other will watch and wait for their second round matchup. We also have our bottom 2 teams. Similarly, one will play this weekend, the other will begin preparing for next season. But in the middle there, we have 4 teams that absolutely beat each other up this past weekend, as we saw 4 one-possession games come down to the wire between the Archers, Whipsnakes, Redwoods, and the Chaos, as they each secured a win over the final weekend against each other in some way, as the Whipsnakes beat the Redwoods on Friday. The Chaos also beat the Archers on Sunday. The Redwoods beat the Chaos, and then in the final regular season game of the season, the Redwoods, or the Archers, beat the Whipsnakes in overtime. Let's start with the Chaos and the Archers, because they met on Friday night, and now less than a full week later, they'll meet again, this time with elimination on the line rather than just seeding. The Archers, they started out hot. They won 3 straight. Then they went on that 3-game skid. However, as we know, each lost by just a single goal. The Chaos, on the other hand, started out slowly, and then they're going on their own, winning 4 of 6, that winning stretch that they're putting on, dating back there to week 3, winning 4 of 6 games. So 2 very different seasons from these 2 teams. They met last Friday. They met back in week 2, but then this past Friday, Ian McKay, the former Archer, nailing a 2-pointer in transition to put the game away. And Austin, I think this could have been better. This couldn't have been a better playoff matchup, as you have one team that's peaking just at the right time. We saw them do just that a year ago and almost run the table. And then you have the other team that's been arguably the best team in the league all season.
Yeah, you talked about a rubber match when it comes to the Whips and the Woods. It's going to be another one for this game. I think it was Atlanta. The Chaos jumped out to a pretty good lead, and then the Archers, I think, scored something like 10 straight on them or something along those lines. It was a crazy run all those weeks ago that I cannot remember. And I remember Will Manny was celebrating in Mark Lassini's face and all that. And then Chaos comes back and, gives them a little bit of revenge in this week. So it'll be fun to watch. I'm really happy that Ian McKay, had that 2-pointer. I think, I was talking to Joe from the PLL, and we were both saying that McKay trade, that wasn't so lopsided as people thought. And I was like, yep, I know.
And it wasn't just the Fields trade. It was the Fields for McKay trade.
Yeah, as everybody was going, wow, Chaos got fleeced because they don't know anything about McKay. Do your research on some Canadian box players, please, and thank you, because McKay is so good. That guy just hit a game-winning 2-pointer after he played the entire season at LSM, and then when CJ Costabile came in, he just stepped up and hit a game-winning 2-pointer.
Picks up a short 6 again. I got this.
Yeah, no, I got us. Don't worry about us.
Plays defense, plays offense, does it all here for this Chaos team.
I am burying the lead when it comes to Chaos, though, because the guy that was fantastic, and I'm sure you know who I'm talking about, is Chase Fraser.
Oh, yeah.
He's unbelievable. And he's a guy, I'll call myself out fully here. I said I don't know what Chase Fraser is as a field player. I had never seen him play field before today. I know what he is as a box player, and he is, he bangs and crashes, and he scores those goals. He's a righty, so he plays alongside Dayton Smith, so he's sort of, not forgotten about, but Dayton Smith scores 100 points in box every year, so Chase Fraser's a little under the radar when it comes to that, but he's a great player, and he's proving it again here. When he gets his chance, he's burying goals, and he's never going to be afraid to go up against anybody, and I think that's part of his game that's really awesome, is he's fearless, and he goes up. He's also very good. He had that toe drag goal. I believe might have been Hossack that he scored against the Atlas, where he just went right around him and then a quick little inside move to the short side of the net. Fantastic goal. I don't know how many he finished with. I'm assuming it's 6 or 7 goals on the weekend. Ridiculous. But when, Josh Byrne is putting up his points, but when those other guys are sort of firing, it's a good thing for Andy Towers and Chaos. It can only be good. When Chase Fraser, who I didn't even know if he was going to make the roster because of how many guys Chaos had, he's coming out and putting up 7 goals in a weekend ahead of the playoffs. It's pretty good. Mac O'Keefe has been fantastic. I was kind of expecting Tanner Cook to be a little more involved, but he's also just being assimilated into a team that was together for maybe 5 weeks before he showed up. So not the craziest thing in the world that he's not just stepped in and been the guy, nor was he going to be the guy because he wasn't a first top 5 pick or anything like that. Anyway, I'm rambling. Josh Byrne has been unbelievable. I think he had a slow start to the year, and he's really rounded out and been great. Don't need to say anything about Blaze Reardon. That guy makes a billion saves a game. He's fantastic. And I think the Chaos defense really proved this weekend against the Archers specifically that they can play that gritty style and they can hold teams to low-scoring games, and when they do, they have the offense to push ahead. So, again, not going to vote them out in the playoffs, especially after last year when they went on that heater. don't let Dylan Ward get hot. Don't let Chaos get hot because they, when they're playing and having fun with that swagger, they're a hard team to stop.
Absolutely. The Chaos, obviously, as you remember there to the 2020 championship series, 0-4 through the group stage, almost ran the table. They had a lead going into the fourth quarter of the championship game. Obviously, Joe Nardella and Zed Williams then ensued to happen. But the Archers, on the other hand, obviously, the Archers, obviously, on the other hand, will be getting a rematch here with the Cavs. Obviously, we're saying the rubber match of these two teams. The Archers taking that matchup back in week 2. The Chaos get this win here in week 8. And the Archers now will ride the coattails of an overtime win into Salt Lake City. A coming home, so to say, for Attackman, Marcus Holman, Will Manny, and goalie Adam Gittleman. We'll have much more on the first playoff game of the weekend come later in the week on GLE. But the Archers, get a big win over the Whipsnakes, back and forth. Obviously, I think this was the win the Archers needed. I would even say not even just the win, but the game they needed, just a back and forth gritty game. Even if they took the loss here, I would say, the Archers, I think they're in a good position going to the playoffs. It would not have been this same matchup, but the Archers going to the playoffs. How do you feel about their chances, obviously, with the plus 24 goal differential? Been one of the best teams thus far this season.
I love the Archers. I mean, they're probably my favorite team to watch when they're firing. When they're not, like against the Chaos game, it's tough because they have so many weapons and you know how good they can be when they're going. But, credit to Chaos. That's not the Archers playing bad. That's the Chaos playing really well. So I love the Archers. They're so fun to watch. I think I alluded to Connor Fields a little while ago. He has 22 points and he's like, I think 4th or 5th in scoring on your team. Like it's pretty good. I think the biggest thing with them is the offense is going to be there most nights. I think this stretch it hasn't been, which has been, problems when it comes to their losses. But their defense is there, their goaltending's there, which I think is good. You had Drew Adams step in, and 14 goals against, but he stood in there and got them the win, and he had a bunch of saves to go with it. I think he had 10 in the first half at least. So you have Gittleman and Adams. There's no goalie controversy there, I can't imagine, because Gittleman's the guy that's gotten them there. Adams just had to play a game because it was a doubleheader. But, Graham Hossack, I think, is up there with the best defenders in the league, if not the best. I really like – I could give a Latrell Harris shout out here. I'll just put it in there just so I get it out of the way, just the old ding. Yeah, their team is fantastic. I think I've spoken really highly of the Archers all season, even when they went through that little stretch where they lost, I think, 3 straight. Something has to come together. I think they're going to have a lot of extra motivation because they lost to the Chaos last year in the playoffs. I think, and they lost to Chaos in this game here. There's a lot of, I think a lot of people that were on the Archers wagon at the start of the season that kind of jumped off it when they went through that 3-game skid, because it wasn't necessarily against teams that were the Whipsnakes or the Redwoods or anything like that crazy, teams that were, sorry, there was a loss to the Whipsnakes in there. I'm thinking of the Chrome loss that, was a team that they thought they were going to wipe the floor with, and Chrome came out and beat them. Mm-hmm. It's going to be very interesting to see what they do, because it's 2 very conflicting styles in my mind. Like, we've talked about the Canadian style, the box sort of style that Andy Towers runs, and then, the Archers are just all over the place, running gun. They do a lot of things well, and they shoot the ball really well. They move it really well. So it's hard to really kind of pinpoint which team has the advantage here. I think from a skill base, it's probably the Archers, just with the names they have. But if the Chaos make it a gritty game again like they did last week, I can't imagine that they're gonna drop it again. If they keep it under 10 goals to the Archers, they're gonna have a really good chance of winning this.
Face-off battle could also be wide open. Obviously, Max Adler putting together one of his better performances of the season there on Sunday against the TD Erlinless Redwoods. Stephen Kelly had a couple goals there on Sunday as well for the Archers, so could be a good face-off battle. Could be a great game, obviously, overall. We saw this just last week, just on this past Friday, so less than a week later, obviously, with that long weather delay, less than a week later, we will see these two teams go at it in our first playoff game of the season of 2021. And then I mentioned it there too. TD Erlin will not, obviously his status is unknown for the weekend. The Redwoods do go out, though, ahead of this game with the Whipsnakes. And off the Whipsnakes roster, off that restricted roster, we talked about, obviously, Christian Mazzone before. They take Drew Simino off the Whipsnakes roster. If TD Ierlan wouldn't be ready, you go with Charlie Leonard and Drew Simino. So now you look back at that Whipsnakes trade, obviously sending Kevin Reisman to the Cannons. They received Drew Simino. He's no longer on the Whipsnakes. They receive Chris Hogan. He is now on the holdout list, obviously signed with the New Orleans Saints. So there goes that trade for the Whipsnakes. But for the Redwoods, obviously you bring in Drew Simino. TD Ierlan's status obviously a big factor, I think, in this game. How much, though, do you think it plays towards the Redwoods' success?
I think TD Ierlan being in or out of this game could be a huge talking point when it comes to the Woods, because I think Bones Kelly, I'm an idiot. Joe Nardella, I'm thinking of the other doubleheader that was on this weekend between the Archers and Redwoods. Joe Nardella is obviously Joe Nardella, and he's going to come in and he's going to have a huge game. So I think the only way you really counteract that is with TD Ierlan, but you're not going to throw him in if it's something serious like a torn ACL, which, not non-contact, but he went down very awkwardly, and you always worry about that, the way his knee sort of went in that situation. So hopefully all the best for TD. If it's Charlie Leonard, that's a hell of a game to get thrown into as, your second start. The first game was hard enough when you had to go up against Bones Kelly and you had to, come up with everything. I'll be interested to see if they throw different looks at Nardella too, because obviously when TD went down, they used Sexton and they used Hartz a little bit. So maybe just to throw him off his rhythm a bit, you just start throwing different guys in and seeing what happens. But that'll be a fun little conversation with Simino and Nardella. Teammates 1 week, and then 7 days later, you're going one-on-one for a playoff spot in the next round. It'll be interesting. I don't really know. It's not much more you can say about Whips and Woods. It's already been said. Like, these teams play each other really close. I mean, the Whips came out on top
so many this week. So many close games between these two teams. It's inevitable that we're going to get another one here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I said that in one of my write-ups, is these two teams are, they're going to be probably looking at each other in the playoffs. I think I said it when I did my preview for the league for Friday's game, and then lo and behold, the way the standings shake out, they're playing a week later against each other. So, I won't argue with it. I won't be upset by it. It's just there's nothing to really point out here. I think Kyle Bernlohr is a big piece in this game as well. He's been a little shaky down the stretch. And Tim Troutner's been pretty good. I think, the defenses are going to play a big part. I'm just sort of going very broad with this, but the midfield is going to play a big thing for the Redwoods as well. And Matt Rambo being back is going to be huge. I think now with Justin Gutterton getting a game in, you're going to see how Jim Stagnator really sees him fitting into this system and how he'll fit with Matt Rambo and Zed Williams. Because I think, Jay Carlson's probably your third guy, and then you run Gutty out of the box with Brad Smith, and Janachuk or Haas, and that's a pretty disgusting little trio of guys you have up top, regardless of how you do it. So, I'm excited to see it. I'm excited to see another Redwoods Whipsnakes game. I don't know what's going to happen. We will see. It seems like the Whips get the best of the Woods almost all the time. So hopefully the Woods can find a way to win. I don't want to bet against the Whips or cheer against them, because I don't want to seem like I'm choosing sides, but like I said before, it's kind of become not fun to see the Whips win because they do it so often. So I wouldn't be upset with the Redwoods moving on and seeing a new champion.
The Whipsnakes also another key storyline to follow with the Redwoods picking up Drew Simino. Joe Nardella would currently be their only face-off specialist. So I'd imagine I don't know if we've heard anything. Again, we're recording this Monday night. Obviously, the waiver deadline has passed. We have been hearing some news of guys getting signed and stuff like that. But I'd imagine the Whipsnakes do pick up another face-off specialist before the playoffs start, obviously in case something happens to Nardella, or in the event that you want to put in a backup or just play a backup in any situation that you would need them. Something to look forward to there with the Whipsnakes. But obviously the Whipsnakes coming into this game, they took the loss there. They took the loss there, I should say, on Sunday against the Archers in overtime. But as you're saying, got Matt Rambo back. You're working Justin Gutterton in. Zed Williams seems to be back at doing Zed Williams things. Obviously, he kind of went on a little bit of a lull there for a couple of weekends, but he seems to be back there for the Whipsnakes. And again, like I said before, I said it last week, this was the Whipsnakes team that we all said at the beginning of the year. They're on 670-something days in a row that they haven't lost. And it's like, this is a team that we said we wouldn't bet against, and now we're all betting against them here in Week 8. So something to watch going into this weekend, but they are what it seems to be, what it seems to look, they're fully healthy.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see. We saw last weekend. That's the good thing about Rambo coming back right in time is you got to see a fully healthy Whipsnakes team over multiple game stretch and not just a one game where they might have blown somebody out and been like, oh yeah, the Whips are back. We got a 2-game slate, so you didn't have to make sort of sweeping conclusions about them one way or the other, which was nice. Matt Rambo is back to being Matt Rambo. I think the interesting thing, I believe off the top of the broadcast, they had him mic'd up where he was talking to one of the refs or the coaches, and he said he had some sort of plate in his hand, and it was a small break that he had. So just maybe not a plate, but just something to give some extra padding for those slashes. So he's not at 100%, but credit to him for battling through. Obviously, we've heard that Rambo is a very tough and athlete that will go through a lot of pain. He has a high threshold, so I'm excited to see him. Zed's back. He's very back. Be scared. Brad Smith's been unbelievable, and Gutty's gonna, he's not gonna be held to 1 point a game for the rest of the playoffs. And maybe I'm wrong, and he is, but I would expect old Gutty to be back, especially with some extra looks within this offense. But the defense has always been there. I think the goaltending, like I said, Kyle Bernlohr needs to come through with a big one in these playoffs, a couple big ones, if they want to make another run at the championship. And Joe Nardella is going to probably win you 50 to 60% at least on draws. He's had a bit of a down year, but I'm not going to bet against him. He's very He's very, very, very good at lacrosse. So, the Whips could very well beat the Woods again. It wouldn't be the worst thing in the world because, 3 straight is a crazy feat. I kind of stuck my foot in my mouth saying I want to see another team win the title. It'd be fun to see them win a 3rd straight, but parodies. Yeah, I don't know. It'd be a good storyline. I don't know if it'd be fun for PLL fans. Maybe the Whips fans would be very ecstatic, obviously, but they've got the guys to do it. So I guess we'll just have to go out and see how they do.
I'm looking at the Water Dogs right now. I'm looking at the Atlas. I'm looking at the Archers. I'm like, there's some teams right now that I think could dethrone the Whips. Now I'm looking at the Chaos too. There's a few teams. Obviously, this name the whole playoff pool. There's a few teams that I think could definitely dethrone the Atlas. Obviously, Redwoods, Water Dogs would get the first 2 chances if the Whipsnakes win this weekend. So someone will watch. Joe Nardella, obviously, if he does get that matchup with Charlie Leonard or Drew Simino, we'd probably expect like a 60% day from Joe, maybe even better. Obviously, TD Erlin would change that, so something to watch going into the weekend. Before we wrap up, obviously, as I mentioned before, we will be getting our finalists for the PLL end of season awards this week. On Thursday, players and coaches will vote. They'll determine the award finalists, and on Thursday, we will find out those finalists. As for the various awards, obviously MVP, Rookie of the Year, the different position awards, Coach of the Year. Each one has different number of finalists. So like the MVP has 5 finalists, Rookie of the Year has 4 finalists. Pretty much every position group is 4 finalists. So just in predicting a few of these, I want to start with the Attackman of the Year because we've had some great attack play this season. Obviously, whether it's Grant Amen, Jeff T, the great Lyle Thompson, Josh Byrne, Rob Pinnell. You look at some of your more goal scorers in terms of Will Manny, Ryan Brown. Who do you see as being those 4 finalists here in terms of the Attackman of the Year?
I think your 4 are probably going to be some. I'll give you let's go with 5 because I can't. Attack's too stacked. Sorry, I'm sort of breaking your rules here, but Grant Amen, Jeff Teat, Lyle Thompson, and
I'd say that those are your safe 3 right there.
And Rob Pinnell would probably be my 4th, even though he had a rough weekend end of season. And then you look into your Will Manny's. Marcus Holman had a big weekend. I'm forgetting somebody for sure off the top of my head here, but Matt Rambo, Ed Williams, guys like that. I think after this weekend, I don't think Matt Rambo's in there, but I think he's certainly got people's ears perked up a little bit, just seeing, or eyes on him, just seeing that performance. So yeah, those would be my 4.
A few of those guys obviously going then into the MVP race as well. Obviously, you're talking about the Grant Amens of the world, the Jeff Teats of the world. Jeff Teat, another name there for Rookie of the Year. I'd imagine he has that award locked up. Something that it seems obviously a few points behind the league leaders, 2 games behind all the league leaders as well. So Jeff T putting together a fantastic season. Let's talk about the goalie of the year. They have 3 finalists allowed, and we have had a few big performances here from some of the game's best goalies. Blaze Reardon, obviously the 2-time defending goalie of the year. He is second in the league in save percentages. Adam Gittleman actually has a 1 percentage point better save percentage. Tim Trounders had a great year, and then obviously not a great year all season in terms of the body of work, but Dylan Ward has been one of his, I think you could say he's been the best goalie over the last couple weeks. So you got really those 4 names. You got to break that down to 3. Which guy would you be pushing off to the side in terms of those 4 names? Blaze Reardon, Adam Gittleman, Tim Troutner, and Dylan Ward.
Oh, no, I like all those guys.
If you were to push one to the side in terms of the save percentage, it would be Ward. Ward's at 53%, Troutner's at 58%, kind of separating that threshold. But as we've been saying all the last couple of weeks, Dylan Ward has been playing great the last couple of seasons. And if, when do you want to play your best lacrosse? Is it week 1, week 2, week 3? No, it's week 5. And in terms of the PLL, week 7, week 8.
It's how we want to interpret the award, in my opinion. If you're going off stats, then yes, it's probably Dylan Ward that's left off. If you're going by impact, then Dylan Ward, I think, over with the recency bias and this little heater the Water Dogs have gone on, I think Dylan Ward has to be in that conversation. I'll just go out and say it. I don't think we need nominees for this award. I think it's pretty safe to say Blaze is probably going to win a 3rd straight. All due respect to Adam Gittleman, and, he has higher stats, but the fact that saved by Blaze,
63% for Gittleman, 62% for Blaze. Blaze has like 30 more saves.
Yeah, and the fact that saved by Blaze has just become a meme at this point should tell you all you need to know about how valuable that guy is to his team and why he's the best goalie in the league. So I'd be shocked if it wasn't Blaze, but just for the sake of this, I'll go Blaze, Gittleman, and we'll go Wardo. Due respect to Tim Troutner, but Wardo's helped his team lock in a 1 seed here. So.
Dylan Ward making Coach Copeland happy there for sending away that first round college, or that first round 2022 college draft pick there, obviously to get Ward in the offseason. So paying dividends here for Coach Copeland as Ward, along with his Water Dogs team, locks up the number 1 seed. Another position group where I could say we got 4 finalists, got to get down to 3, and there's 4 names that pop off the screen. Obviously, you got Trevor Baptiste and T.D. Erlin. At the face-off position. 65% of winning percentage for both of those guys. They both took over 200 draws, and then Baptiste has the edge by 4 ground balls in that ground ball category. You got those 2 guys. Joe Nardella, who I would say would have been the face-off athlete of the year last season. They didn't really do many of those awards last season, but I would say that he would have been up in that running. 57% for Nardella. And then Jake, kind of a similar situation, Jake Withers at 54%. He might be that guy on the outside looking in, but how do you see this face-off battle in terms of the face-off guys for this award for the finalists?
I love my Canadians, but I think Jake Withers just misses out on the podium, unfortunately. I think, Joe Nardella should have won last year if they did present the award. Unfortunately, they didn't. I mean, the guy was up for MVP last season, or in everyone's books mostly. And T.D. Erlin and Trevor Baptiste are just, they've been on another level this season. So it's got to be those 3, unfortunately. I love what Wiz has done, but, there's only a certain amount. Unfortunately, face-off's a really deep position this year, especially with TD's addition.
Final position group we'll look at here. Defensive Player of the Year. We have 4 finalists allowed. Obviously, we've had our recent winners in terms of Matt Dunn. He won last season. Jared Newman was the 2019 winner. You could have said that Matt Dunn could have won there in 2019. I don't know if I have Matt Dunn right now in my 4 finalists, but I would say that he is right there, maybe a 5. I'm looking at it right now. Graham Hoslick, Ben Randall, Michael Rexroad, Garrett Epple. I have those 4 as my 4 finalists. What would you, looking at your finalists, what would you say about that?
I like the Ben Randall one. I don't think he's going to get his.
Ben Randall gave up his first, what was an assist to somebody, an assist to Matt
It was
Randall.
Joe said on Twitter. Yeah, Joe said on Twitter it was his first point from an assignment of his since July the 2nd, I believe.
Which is unreal.
It's ridiculous. I don't think it's because it's stats based. I don't know that he's going to get the recognition he deserves. I think a guy like, Liam Burns could get a look, especially considering the CTO numbers. Do I think he should be getting it? Maybe not. He's not really that matchup defenseman. He's more of the, communicator and organizer, and then he's a slide guy. sort of what Brody Merrill did last year for the Water Dogs. He's filling that role, and he's done a very good job in it. But I think when you look at Defender of the Year, it's going to go to, your top matchup defensemen, your Duns, your Hossicks, your guys like that. So, another guy that's been really good is Jake Pulver. I think he's tied for the league lead in CTOs this year. He deserves a lot of credit, but I think, Hossick, I think, is your number one with a bullet. Randall, I think, should be up there. I don't know if he will be, but I'll put him in mine because that one stat from Joe was like, that's defensive. That's elite.
That's lockdown defense right there.
Yeah, that's elite defensive play.
Yeah.
And then I'll go with one of Rexroad or Pulver just for mine, and I'm sure I'm leaving out somebody that probably will get in. Garrett Epples had a good season, love him or hate him. Somebody like that. I wouldn't be surprised if Glazner, somebody that does really well. Rexroad's really good. I really like Rexroad, but yeah, I think he or Pulver will probably get the nod here, but I think Graham Hossick's probably pretty locked in for that award.
We will see how those finalists go. Obviously, we will find those out Thursday at some point. But pretty much, we're looking forward to this quarterfinal round. Very excited for it. We'll have 3 great games: 1 on Friday night, 2 on Saturday. And the winners will move on to the semifinal. The winner of the Redwoods and Whipsnakes set to play the Water Dogs, and then we'll get the winners of those other 2 games will play each other. Kind of, I was about to say, kind of interesting, kind of raising questions. Obviously, you say, oh, the Water Dogs get the number 1 seed. Shouldn't they play the lowest seed that moves on, like the NFL does it? That's not how the PLL is doing it. They kind of have their bracket all set for how the teams will advance. But obviously, we'll see how that goes into the weekend.
Yeah, the reseeding is a bit of a head scratcher, but I mean, if that's how they're going to do it, then it's not going to be easy to make it to the title, regardless of who you are.
Yeah.
Either
way, you're going through somebody in the semifinal that if it was to be somebody else, it's like, well, you really don't want to pick who you're going to play. It's like,
whether it's the 7 seed or the 2 seed, like the team's equally not ideal to play against. Yeah. So you're going to have to grind regardless. So, I mean, I don't think it makes a big difference in the grand scheme of things, but maybe, like I said in previous episodes, maybe like a hot streak or something like that. You don't want to catch a team on a heater, so maybe that plays into it. But, they're going to have to grind regardless. So I don't think maybe they'll be complaining that the 4 and 5 seeds are the Whips and Woods. That's not exactly ideal, but it is what it is. They got to go through them now. They don't have a choice.
Couple teams here getting on hot streaks. The Water Dogs are riding 4 games going in to the playoffs. They'll have this first round bye. The Atlas were going 5 games in a row. They lost to the Water Dogs. They'll try to pick up that winning streak this weekend against the Cannons. The Archers have been one of the best teams all season, obviously with the plus 24 score differential. The Redwoods are getting hot. The Whipsnakes are back to full health. The Chaos were getting hot there towards the end of the season. And then obviously the Cannons, you get in, anything can happen when you get in, especially in this league. We see all the parity that we get. But week 8 in the entire PLL regular season is now officially in the books. The quarterfinals are set for this weekend. And as I said before, we'll be back to look ahead to all 3 matchups from out in Salt Lake City later this week on Goal Line Extended. So make sure to follow both the show and Lacrosse Flash across social media for updates and links to watch the show. We should definitely hope to be getting some more developments on guys like TD Erlin and Michael Sowers, maybe even a Jack Concannon update sometime throughout the week regarding their statuses for the weekend. But Austin, I want to thank you for joining me today as we reflect on week 8 in the PLL and look ahead to this weekend's playoffs. But that is going to do it for today's episode of the PLL Flash. I want to thank you all for watching. If you are not already, make sure to subscribe to Lacrosse Flash on YouTube. Hit the notification bell so that you don't miss any future shows, and follow along on Instagram and Twitter at Lacrosse Flash. All the links that you will need, including our website, lacrosseflash.com, will be in the description. But week 8 in the PLL has come and gone. The entire regular season at that in the PLL has come and gone, and we're now on to the playoffs. We'll be here covering it all on the PLL Flash and on Goal Line Extended. So make sure to like, follow, and subscribe so that you don't miss any of it. I hope you all have an incredible week, and we will talk to you on Friday. Cheers.